Topic, Light of the Bhagavata, is our topic for this visit here in Palatine. So far we've covered parts 1 and 2. So a little summary of parts 1 and 2. Part 1 was a little introduction to how this book came about. The book came about when Srila Prabhupada was in the Vanaprastha stage of his life. He had turned over his business to his eldest sons to run the business, to maintain the household, maintain his wife, and he entered into the Vanaprastha stage. And after 2 years of travel here and there and seeing what he could begin as in the matter of helping to fulfill the mission that his spiritual master had given him. The mission was take this message of Lord Chaitanya and Srimad Bhagavatam and deliver it to the English-speaking parts of the world. Because it was already noted by his spiritual master and many others in the spiritual organization of his spiritual master, that he was very qualified. Qualified in a number of ways. One big way was his skill in writing, particularly his skill in writing in the English language. And that was noted by his spiritual master, and he requested him. Even before that was noted, but without all the details, he had a mission, specifically repeated the second time, just days before his spiritual master left this world, in a letter, in writing, this is what I want you to do. So he had his mission. But he didn't feel qualified, he didn't have resources, etc., etc., etc. But the mission was there nonetheless. So from 1961, no, 1956 to 1961, Srila Prabhupada resided in a little room in Vrindavan, near Keshigat, which is right by the side of the river Jamuna. A room that was 19 feet, 17 feet by 9 feet. Think of something that's that big. That's where he lived. And from there, he was planning to fulfill Mission Impossible. Take the message of Lord Chaitanya all over the world. Because the English-speaking parts of the world is a big part of the world. One fellow. So many details, but minus the details. A friend of his in Delhi gave him a pamphlet that was promoting an event that was to take place about 5 months later. It was an event in Tokyo called Conference for Cultivation of the Human Spirit. Very high-sounding, euphemistic kind of title. Prabhupada became inspired. He wrote to the organizer, who wrote back, sending him a letter that was sufficient to get a passport and visa to go to Tokyo. And, in the time of history, when this took place, 61, this was shortly after World War II. During World War I and World War II, everyone was mistrusting one nation, another nation, because who knows who's going to hurt us. And that was winding down, and there was now a resurgence of let's work together. Let's cooperate together and seek unity rather than war. The pendulum was swinging in that direction, in other words, in the world, certainly amongst intellectuals and thoughtful people. So with that invitation to go to such a conference, Prabhupada embarked on writing this book. He gave it the name Light of the Bhagavad. The title, Light of the Bhagavad, comes from, we'll see shortly, from one verse in the introductory 3 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam, which says, paraphrasing, now that Krishna has departed, because the Bhagavatam was written shortly after Krishna departed, religious principles will be upheld and protected by this Srimad Bhagavatam. As the sun sets at night, it becomes dark, in the darkness of the night of Kali Yuga, because that the yuga that begins just after Krishna's departure, good fortune. As brilliant as the sun, but as soothing and cooling as the moon, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the place where religious principles will take shelter and be protected. Light of the Bhagavad was the title of the book. 20,000 word book, written for an audience he had never seen before, heard before, but he had some sense that people in the Far East, they have an appreciation for understanding life through lessons from nature. Part of culture. You'll see shortly. I'll give some example. With that understanding, Light of the Bhagavad was written drawing verses. It's not the entire chapter, but Canto 10, Chapter 20. You'll see in a moment where that fits into the whole of the Bhagavatam. But the topic of Canto 10, Chapter 20 is what the descriptions of the seasons. After the summer season comes, rainy season. And after the rainy season comes the autumn season. So that's the title of the chapter. That the verses, using visual sound representations as well as paintings, Prabhupada wanted to help his audience, intellectual, refined, cultured people thinking about peace in the world and people working together, cultivation of the human spirit. That was the conference. How to elevate that to transcendence. The message of the Bhagavatam. The book was never published, in part because he didn't have the money to publish it, nor did he have the money to get on an airplane and go to Japan from Delhi. He didn't have money. And he tried to seek sponsors and donors and people that would help, people that have appreciation for India's culture and its gift to the world. And he came up empty-handed, but he wasn't discouraged. He just a little disappointed, but he continued moving forward. And 23 years later, the book was published. Once devotees found the manuscript, BBT published it in Hong Kong, in Chinese, from the English manuscript. And since then, it's been translated all over the world and printed by the BBT. So that was the first day. And then the second day, we spent most of our time giving a nice aesthetic appreciation of the rainy season in Vrindavan, including a big focus on the personality of the rainy season. the personality of the rainy season has a name, and she's the cousin sister of Vrinda Devi, who is an integral personality, transcendental personality in Krishna's pastimes. Vrinda Devi is the personification of Krishna's Leela Shakti. And her cousin sister is rainy season personified, and we spent some time describing her and Krishna, and we heard some very nice poetic description of what it was like in Vrindavan during the rainy season, written by a wonderful poet, Kavi Karnapur. That was 2 classes. So now we're ready to begin. This Light of the Bhagavat has 48 verses, so I've divided it up into groups of 5. So today we'll cover the first 5. It's not the first 5 verses in chapter 20, it's selected verses rewritten and paraphrased for his audience. The audience being intellectuals, leaders, visionary people who want to see unity of the human spirit. So with that view in mind, he selected some verses and presented them. So now let's see. Light of the Bhagavat. It was written for a conference in Japan, 1961. Think about the world situation in 1961. A world conference, the Congress for Cultivating the Human Spirit. And Srila Prabhupada, along with writing the book, he put in writing the 48 or 50 illustrations that he wanted the organizer to put together. It didn't happen. So later Tamal Krishna Maharaj did. So here's some examples of some of the illustrations this artist made. Prabhupada's plan was that these would be printed in the book. They would be blown up on poster-size easel boards on display at the conference, and people could get a visual picture. And then they'd have the book, and then he would speak. So a combined effort to help elevate the consciousness of his audience to the Bhagavatam's picture of cultivation of the human spirit. So here's a photograph of the lady, the artist. At this time in her life, she was quite old when she did all these paintings. She was an award-winning artist of a particular style. I don't know much about the style, but Gongbi Taoist style, certain particular style. So she was selected, she agreed. It took a whole year. From somewhere in southeast China, she took a train, went to Hong Kong, brought her art portfolio, showed it to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, painting by painting. He was the art director, she was the artist, and Prabhupada's words were the guiding light. And it ended up with paintings, and the book was eventually published in Hong Kong, in Chinese. Here's the verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3. This Bhagavat Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in this age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So that's the verse from which the title was drawn, Light of the Bhagavat, or as the verse says, as brilliant as the sun. And different paintings were used over a period of time for the cover. This was one that was used in China. You can see the Chinese imprint in the lower right corner. But the obviously this publication is in English, but the original artwork was in Chinese. And essentially it's a description of the monsoon and autumn season in Vrindavan, chapter 20 of Canto 10. And the illustrations, as well as the text, gives us a picture of spiritual truths seen through nature, scenes in nature. I mentioned this yesterday, but just yesterday, I received a letter from a young lady, maybe 30 years old, who described in the letter, I'll show you what she described. She's from a certain minority sect in China, in the southeastern part of a certain province. It's right smack in the center of China. And they're people of this minority sect or minority group. They worship nature. Now, Prabhupada, understanding that this, besides this particular example, he understood in general that is part of the culture of the Far East. So my appreciation was he was using what we call these days bridge preaching. Have you heard that phrase before? Bridge preaching? Something that people know, and we go across the bridge, talk to them about that something that they know, take them by the hand, and then take them across the bridge to transcendence. It's called bridge preaching. You meet people on their common ground. So like, a vegetarian cooking class. It's not teaching bhakti, teaching vegetarian cooking class. But in the course of the vegetarian cooking class, they learn not only vegetarian cooking, but how they can offer the food to Krishna and how that's spiritually beneficial. And here's the message of Bhagavata about the benefits of taking prasadam, that which is offered to Krishna. That's an example. Or another example is Hatha Yoga. It has nothing to do directly with bhakti, but people like Hatha Yoga, and then from that they can learn other dimensions of the bhakti process. Or something that I've personally done is helping people overcome negative emotions. There's a 4-part seminar, The Art of Meditation, Overcoming Negative Emotion, because that's a big deal for people, stress and anxiety. And so it's not directly bhakti, but it's helping people get on the bridge that brings them to bhakti. So Prabhupada was using the same principle long, long ago, where he knew that people have an interest in nature and understanding life and lessons of life through nature. And he took that position and then quickly, very gently, but also very quickly and very expertly, brought them to meet Krishna. Because Bhagavata Purana is history, it's Purana, but it's specifically the center of that history is Bhagavan. And even specifically from the 10th canto is Krishna in Vrindavan. So he took Krishna in Vrindavan and brought the audience that has some appreciation for learning lessons about life from nature and brought them to meet Krishna. And other things, sociology and governance and taxation and many, many things using the poetic language of the Bhagavatam. It's brilliant. The Bhagavatam is as brilliant as the sun, and Prabhupada's writing skill was also brilliant. Here's the text that I received yesterday from a young woman she identified herself, she's from Adong, and she called it's a Chinese national minority in central China. They have a custom that they worship nature. They worship mountains, rivers, trees, bridges, and rocks. They offer respect to the sky and to gods. Those who consider themselves Dong, or this minority group, they offer ancestors every meal. Let the ancestors eat first. And she also wrote that before killing an animal, because they're not vegetarian, they chant a spell. That was her language. I mean, like say a mantra or something, to assist the soul to take another birth as a good person. And she didn't go further than that, but it gives you an idea. So I wrote back to this young lady, "You're a really excellent writer. When this book is republished in Chinese, read it carefully, so carefully that you can use your writing skill to write little essays for the people from which you grew up, amongst which you grew up, so they can also do as Prabhupada did, help them make a connection to respecting nature and learning lessons and connecting to the person who's behind nature." Because that's what Prabhupada does. So let's see how he does it. The chronology of the Bhagavatam, the 2 chapters prior to chapter 20, 18 and 19. Krishna has come back from the forest. He's now in Vraja with his family. And the cowherd boys are relating to all the elders, things that Balaram did, his killing a Pralambasura, and Krishna is rescuing them from a second forest fire. The elders are now discussing amongst themselves, who are these 2 boys anyways? They must be exalted demigods. That's how that section ends. The chronology of this is Krishna is not yet 7 years of age, because when Krishna was 7, that's when he lifted Govardhan Hill. So he's somewhere between 5 and 7 years of age when this is describing. And right after that section comes 20, it's the rainy season. And from this rainy season, then following that the autumn season, the understanding is that these are, in the context of Srimad Bhagavatam, they're udipans, which is a nice Sanskrit word. That means a stimulation, emotional stimulation. Just hearing about the rainy season is meant by Vyas and subjectively upon the reader or the hearer of Srimad Bhagavatam. It stimulates intense spiritual joy because it's in relation to Krishna entirely. So that's the background. And now we're ready for 5 chapters, starting with the first chapter. The title Prabhupada has given it, good way to introduce, Reestablishing a Relationship with the Supreme. That's his starting point. So he rewrote, or he wrote for the purpose of his audience, the following text. The arrival of clouds, accompanied by thunder and flashes of lightning all over the sky, provides a picture of life-giving hope. Now this painting that you see, this is one of the Chinese artist's paintings. But I'll explain. I embellished by taking from the internet many other paintings in the course of all of this that are Chinese painting, traditional Chinese art, depicting something that complements the message. Covered by deep bluish clouds, the sky appears artificially dressed. The thunder and lightning within the clouds are signs of hope for a new way of life. So the structure that Prabhupada did is he gave these rephrased verses and then short 2 or 3 paragraph commentaries explaining the verse. And the explanation is the way that Prabhupada composed it. He explains it in the commentary. It's poetic imagery. And he explains this sunlight indicates the living entity's swarup effulgence. Swarup means his spiritual form. So right away we're getting philosophy. Living entities have spiritual form. There's coverings, gross and subtle covering, gross body, subtle body, and there's a soul, and that's the jiva. And the jiva has spiritual form. And the spiritual form has effulgence. So he's likening, in his composition, the sunlight is to the spiritual effulgence of the soul's spiritual form. And then there's coverings of that spiritual effulgence. There's lightning, thunder, and clouds, indicating, referring to the modes of nature: goodness, passion, ignorance. Clouds, like ignorance. Thunder, like rajas, and lightning, like goodness. Here's another painting showing the same kind of an idea. And in his writing, in his commentary, the lightning is providing life-giving hope. The life-giving hope is to get free from the covering or to reestablish our relationship with Krishna. Right away, he's taking a scene in nature and making a Krishna connection. Really wonderful. Here's another of that same painting. The lightning gives hope for those who are spiritually inclined to reestablish our relationship with Krishna. Then he goes into who is Krishna. Krishna is the absolute truth, and defining the absolute truth, same way the Bhagavatam does. The absolute truth means that from which everything comes. Whatever it is from which everything comes, that's the absolute truth, and that absolute truth is Krishna. And then part of what comes from the absolute truth are living entities. So this is another cover painting of the book. The absolute truth can be understood as being like the serene, limitless, expansive sky. Now bear in mind, it's not just creating imagery, he's connecting with the sensibility of his audience. Seeing nature, and within nature, getting some understanding of truths about life. So we look in the sky, vast, vast, vast empty sky, serene, limitless, expansive sky, that's the absolute truth. And resting within that absolute truth, there's everything, including tiny living entities that are influenced by the modes of nature within the vastness of the sky. Then he goes further into the 3 modes of nature. The cloud of covering is compared to the quality of ignorance. Although the living entity is originally pure, thus the living entity becomes covered by clouds, like a portion of the sky becomes covered by clouds. And when there's this cloud of covering, it causes forgetfulness of who we really are and the cause of everything, the absolute truth. Ignorance leads to forgetfulness of the absolute truth and our original identity. And then in turn, when we forget our original identity, there's this idea of separatism. Remember what the theme of this conference is: uplifting human spirit. And to uplift human spirit, you have to remove coverings. The clouds are like coverings. Forgetfulness of who we are is the byproduct of those clouds. And when one is covered in that way, then there's this separatism. And that's the ground of false ego. Notice what he's doing. I think it's masterful. So then he goes right into a very essential message of the Vedas. False ego, the false sense of I, has its corollary, the false sense of mine. Mine is what comes from me. For example, supposing I think I'm this body. Most people think they're their body. So if the body is me, then what falls into the category of mind is what's produced from this body. So my work is produced from the body, and so the fruits of work is mine. My income, or my work product. Supposing I use this body as a carpenter. So I take some wood and some tools and make a table. So now the table is mine because it came from me. But where the tools come from, where the wood come from, where the ability come from, where does everything come from? One forgets if one is in the false conception of I. And then we have, in the world, we have people thinking this is mine and this is mine and this is mine. And if they're thinking this is mine, some people are thinking, no, it's mine. And then you get isms, communism, capitalism, commercialism, and so forth. And there's clash. That's the separatism. So it's bringing about the unity of the human spirit, but you have to get beyond the bodily conception. So the clouds leading to forgetfulness of who we are, leading to the misconception and separatism. It's just on the first verse. I find it masterful. False separatism mixed in with the quality of passion gives rise to a creative force of separate lordship over the mode of ignorance. So people fight over resources or the land that can provide the resources, etc., 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 etc. The flash of lightning is the only beam of hope that can lead one to the path of knowledge. Now, this is another painting of a similar nature, showing the lightning coming out of the cloud. Remember, it's the rainy season. There's lightning comes from the clouds. Next, we're still on the first verse. He's now describing to his reader a very sophisticated philosophy of the simultaneous oneness and difference of all things. The oneness is everything that exists comes from the same source. There's the oneness. But then there's a distinction between that which comes from the source and the source, because that which comes from is not the source. It's an energy of the energetic. And then amongst the energies, there's varieties of energies. So there's differences within that state of oneness. He's just taking a look at in the beginning of the rainy season, explaining higher teachings for an audience that likes to learn lessons from nature. So going back, The limitless sky, or the all-pervading absolute truth, is simultaneously one and different from the fractional portion of the sky or living entity that's liable to be covered by a dark cloud. So this sky today is pretty cloudy, but supposing it was not all cloudy like it is today, and over there's a cloud, and there's sky, and then over there's a cloud. So that cloud portion of the sky is like a living entity, and there's so many living entities, so many clouds in the sky, but those clouds are floating in the vastness of the vast sky. So living entities similarly were within that which is the totality of the source of everything, were tiny portions of that which is the totality of everything. And we, living entities, are liable to be covered by a portion of the sky, like a cloud may cover a portion of the sky, but a cloud can't cover the whole sky. As I'm speaking, I'm thinking about landing in Chicago a few days ago. The flight landed at around, almost 7 a.m. So before it was 7 a.m., it was darkness in all directions, where the sun is there, but it was, the hour of the morning was still dark, and just look out the window and it's just darkness everywhere. And then we started descending. You could, feel your ears popping and air pressure changing. And then there's this big sea of clouds and just a little bit of light on the horizon. It was really nice. Very artistic. And then going down and down and down, and then entering into this type of cloud and that type of cloud and that type of cloud, and the cumulus clouds and little thin clouds below those cumulus clouds, layers and layers and layers and layers of clouds. And then by that time the sun was up. We could see everything clearly. So using the poetry of the rainy season, that portion of the sky that's covered by clouds may be likened to living entities that are within a portion of the vastness of the vast, vast, limitless sky, or tiny parts of the Supreme, liable to be covered. So here's the summary of the first verse. It's using poetic imagery to help the reader that likes to understand principles of life through nature. There's the vast empty sky, the absolute truth. There's the portions of the sky that are covered with clouds, that's jivas. And there's modes of nature that are like the clouds themselves, the thunder, and the lightning. And the theme again is this: lightning, or the mode of goodness, is the only beam of hope that can lead one to the path of knowledge. And that's masterful, just taking a little section. Chapter 2. So the first one was disclosing the absolute truth, the source of everything, the Supreme Person. Next comes how to find happiness through obedience to the laws of that Supreme Person. So here's the artwork of that nice artistic lady. The heading of this chapter, the scorching heat of material existence. That's the summer season. The scorching heat of the sun evaporates water from the seas, rivers, lakes, and reservoirs, and there's little water anywhere. People become thirsty and always look overhead for rain. but in despair. Yet, just at the right moment, torrents of rain begin to fall everywhere on the land, even on the hard stones, and the land becomes overflooded. So he's taking this image, you see the painting, you see the words, and he's going to teach lessons about life. And of course, Krishna is going to be at the center. So there's torrential rains of mercy, then people benefit. He then right away goes to taxation. Like the sun draws water from reservoirs of water and distributes it through clouds, so also there's this scorching heat of unrealistic taxation, and then insufficient amount is returned back to the citizens. He writes this in his own way. These are not his images, obviously. And nature distributes water equally everywhere, on rocks, on land, and on the soil, but government doesn't necessarily distribute the taxation equally. So he then takes the reader to Vedic culture, where the king, here in this case Maharaj Parikshit, was guided by qualified brahmanas. Kings were trained in good character by ideal teachers. And with the absence of that training of the leaders by ideal teachers, people suffer because they don't have good leaders who take taxes in different ways and don't know properly how to distribute it. So people suffer. Listen carefully to where he's taking the reader. He's going to take the reader to say the people need to be properly educated. The kings need to be properly educated. And the kings need to see that the people are properly educated so that we can have good citizenship and good leadership and happiness instead of folly. Good character in the mass of people is the first symptom and first principle necessary for a good government and for their suitable distribution of personal wealth. Interesting, huh? Taking the picture of nature at the end of the hot summer season, finally comes the rain, distributing the mercy. He naturally goes to the Sankirtan movement, is that means of sacrifice for people in general, and helping through the purification that comes from Sankirtan to add the education in Vedic wisdom. And when there's education in Vedic wisdom plus the purification that comes from the Sankirtan Yajna, then persons are more disposed in their heart to follow or be obedient to the natural laws or the principles that are given within the Vedas. Prabhupada liked this phrase, so he repeats it in this commentary. Obedience is the first law of discipline. Have you heard that before? Obedience is the first law of discipline. So, obedience to whom? And the indication through Bhagavata is obedience to Bhagavan. And being disciplined by the laws given by Bhagavan then leads to elevation of society and proper prosperity. Based upon this is the conclusion of the second verse. Therefore, ample state taxes should be spent to build character of people in general. And the building of character is enriched, made possible by Sankirtan. That's the principle that Prabhupada used when introducing Krishna consciousness all over the world. Just this morning, I was listening to Prabhupada speaking about how the Hare Krishna mantra has become very popular in Yugoslavia. I didn't know that until I heard it this morning. And Prabhupada asked, Yugoslavia is a communist country, right? You know, during that time, for sure, it was a communist country. And nonetheless, the devotees in Yugoslavia were publicly chanting Hare Krishna mantra. And Prabhupada's point was, it's universal. Language doesn't matter. What did they know what the meaning of Hare Krishna mantra is? But it had a spiritualizing impact, and the kirtaniers were becoming very joyful, and as a result, more qualified to hear and understand Vedic wisdom. So his appeal was that governments should promote good character, in part by promoting Sankirtan. Of course, they didn't do it, but he's just speaking principle, because it builds good character. It helps to build good character. The audience that he was dealing with weren't people of good character. I mean, some were, but many weren't. But they became more capable of manifesting good character by Sankirtan, and then training over and over and over and over in the principles of Vedic wisdom, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Now remember his audience. These are people he's never met. Some of them consider themselves to be peacemaker type of people, thinking, what are some principles that can be applied in the world to help elevate the human spirit? And then he wants to help them understand that through scenes of nature. Chapter 3. So remember the sequence? Obedience to the laws of the Supreme. First, who is the Supreme? And now more about the lawmaker behind the laws. This is one of the paintings done by this artist lady. Attracted by electricity throughout the sky and driven by forceful winds, clouds gradually cover the surface of the earth to satisfy the needy people by supplying water, which is the substance of their life. The clouds bestow rains upon man as mercy of the Lord, who is always kind to the needy living beings. So the heading is the lawmaker behind the laws, and now he's going to the merciful nature of the lawmaker. The laws are for purpose of bestowing mercy on others. Despite our gross disobedience to the laws of nature, Krishna is always kind and merciful. And he gives his mercy very liberally, just like the rains during the rainy season. Water is one of the most important items for our maintenance. And he goes into describing, in simple language, it's not lengthy. One can go into it in a lengthy manner, but by natural process, from the summer season that's hot, the sun is drawing water, the water is forming clouds, the clouds then pour down the rain or snow depending upon the place, and that goes back into the reservoirs of water and nourishes life, so that the life on Earth planet can be nourished by the water, and the sun continues to draw water and so forth. So this is, where's the heat of the sun? heat and light of the sun come from? From the source of everything. Through the heat and light of the sun, life is being maintained, and water is being circulated to provide necessities of life. And there's a person behind that arrangement. That person behind the arrangement is the lawmaker, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The material nature works so nicely and not blindly because of the superintendence of the supremely powerful Krishna. This is something that I was appreciating specifically from this young woman from the Dong community in China, that they worship nature, but they're not as clearly understanding the powerful Krishna behind nature that bestows things and does things and helps them. So it's just, Prabhupada is notching it up. So it's not just appreciation of nature and respecting nature and doing different activities that are displays of honor of nature, but the Supreme who's behind the nature. So that's his message in this verse. Always remembering Krishna's mercy. Now here's showing turmoil. The divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So he inserts a verse from Bhagavad Gita. Now back to the poetry or the metaphors. The cloud-like jivas are bestowers of that mercy when properly trained. And here's a little section just drawn right from his commentary. Maharaj Dasarath, the father of Lord Ramachandra, used to fight with his enemies. It was said that he approached them just like a farmer uprooting unnecessary plants and trees. When there was need of giving charity, he used to distribute money exactly as the cloud distributes rain. The distribution of rain by clouds is so sumptuous that it is compared to the distribution of wealth by a great, munificent person. The clouds' downpour is so sufficient that the rains even fall on rocks and hills and on the oceans and seas where there is no need for water. A cloud is like a charitable person who opens his treasury for distribution and does not discriminate whether the charity is needed or not. He gives in charity open-handedly. He's taking some history from Ramayana, connecting it to the imagery of the Bhagavatam and the principle of taxation and distribution of taxation. Mercifully given, freely given. He makes reference, without giving the Bhagavatam history, of one king. I'll narrate a little bit. He doesn't do that in this section. Ranti Dev was especially known to be very charitable. So one time Ranti Dev, for the benefit of his citizens, underwent a very severe, I forget the number of days, 100 days or some even larger number of days of fasting, with the purpose that through that austerity some benefit would come, and the benefit he wanted to be passed on to his citizens. And at the end of that long period of fasting, it was time to break the fast. So he had his cooks make a sumptuous meal. They sat him on an elevated seat, and just as he was about to break the fast, along came a beggar who was really hungry. And he asked the king, could I have something to eat? Sure. He fed half of what he was given to the beggar. And when the beggar finished, then he was going to take the other half. And as he was about to take the other half, into the place where he was breaking the fast came a man with some puppies. You can see in the painting. And the man said, my puppies are really hungry. Can they have something? So he said, sure. And he gave the other half. And all he had left was some water. So he was going to break the fast drinking water. And it was just getting ready to drink the water. In came a sadhu saying, I'm very thirsty. I have some water. Then in the Bhagavatam it says he then offers a prayer to the Supreme Lord saying, what good fortune that when one can sacrifice what one has for the benefit of others. This is the life. And the painting shows those three personalities who came were Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and some other personality, Indra, because they had heard about the charitableness of Ranti Dev. They wanted to examine what's the limit. They found he doesn't have a limit. He was through and through charitable. So like Ranti Dev, so also Prabhupada is pointing to leaders, and those who are being educated by the leaders should understand principles of life, the importance of mercy, the importance of charity, and distributing it liberally. There's a lot to be said, but about charity. Charity is a very important principle of life. Very important principle of life. Here's a summary of the poetic imagery of this verse. There's the clouds. Of course, there's different metaphors, but clouds are compared to merciful benefactors who are compassionate, karuna. As clouds are agitated by wind, so similarly, merciful persons are moved by the suffering of people. The lightning in rain clouds is the light by which that's these merciful persons, see the distressed condition of the earth due to the hot summer season. The blowing winds are their heavy breathing, such as that found in a distressed person. The huge clouds were shaking because of feelings of compassion, and releasing all their water, just as merciful persons even give up their lives for the welfare of others. So we're not far into all the verses here, but we're getting an interesting way of how to depict values of life through images in nature. Attracted by electricity throughout the sky and driven by forceful winds, clouds gradually cover the surface of the earth to satisfy the needy people by supplying water, which is the substance of their life. The clouds bestow rains upon man as the mercy of the Lord was always kind to the needy living being. Another painting that wasn't done by this lady, but just right from the internet. There's lots of, naturally so, scenes of nature painted by traditional Chinese artists depicting something that moves them to show that scene of nature. So here's a little summary. Just as water is one of the most important items for our maintenance, similarly, eagerness to receive mercy from the Supreme is an essential part of our well-being. Acknowledging this necessity is likewise an essential element of cultivation of the human spirit. So here's a message for his audience. Remember, the audience is this symposium or conference on cultivation of the human spirit in Tokyo. So he's appealing to these intellectuals or thoughtful people or those who want to help be agents to bring about elevation of consciousness and cooperation amongst people who are at war with each other for so long. Being merciful, just as the cloud is merciful, our being merciful to one another is a very important item. That's the 3 verses so far out of 5. Chapter 4 has a title, subtitle, Life of Freedom in Eternity, Knowledge and Bliss. Whew, how are you going to get that from nature? Here's the painting this lady did, artist from China. After heavy rain showers, the fields and forests in all directions appear green and healthy. Thus they resemble a man who has undergone severe austerities for some material gain and has achieved his end, for such a man is strong, hearty, and good-looking. Now I thought I would just add, here's the verse from Canto 10, Chapter 20, verse number 7. Here's how the verse reads. Thus the earth was like a person whose body has been emaciated by austerities undergone for material purpose, but who again becomes fully nourished when he achieves the fruit of those austerities. So he's changed the language a bit. And the BBT purport reads, Tapasya or austerities should be accepted only for realizing the Supreme Lord. By accepting austerity in devotional service, one regains his spiritual life. And as soon as one regains his spiritual life, he enjoys unlimited spiritual bliss. I mean, here's 2 examples. One example is we just completed observing the Kartik month. And it's recommended, and many persons followed the recommendation, to accept some austerities, some vrata for Kartik. Kartik vrata, very common. And by that observance, then one gets some spiritual strength. And spiritual life is revived through that spiritual strength. So it's recommended. Little, not necessarily extreme, austerities for a spiritual purpose has benefit. Here's another. Today's Ekadasi. Now, within our ISKCON practice, Gaudiya practice, one is, there's a very minor austerity, minimal austerity to be observed according to the scriptures, and that is we refrain from beans and grains on Ekadasis, twice a month. Pretty modest. But violating it causes a problem, and observing it gives spiritual benefit. And then on Ekadasis, one may incrementally increase. Like many devotees, for example, many devotees have a practice that on Ekadasis they increase their japa from their certain minimum to some number increase every Ekadasi, or some additional fasting besides those beans and grains, or something else or something else. So those observances, Kartik month, Kadasi days, are just two examples of some simple austerity, but done with regularity and with a devotional purpose, can give one spiritual strength. And with that spiritual strength, greater purity and greater spiritual awareness, just by going through everyday things of life. It works that way. For example, to having been in Vrindavan for this Kartik month and for a good part of the Kartik month, and hearing descriptions of our great acharyas and their realizations, etc., where do they get the capacity to have these realizations? Is there the capacity to have anything? The capacity to walk across the floor, the capacity to digest your food, the capacity to do anything comes from the same source. And those that have spiritual strength, they can experience things and understand things and see things that we don't have the capacity for, just by spiritual strength. So it doesn't mean that it has to be something severe, austerities that are severe. It just means a principle of tapasya, where you forego something that's worldly and you do something spiritual instead of something worldly. One of the things I understood while visiting in Vrindavan was the Mughal king that ruled during the time of the six Goswamis. His name was Akbar. And although he was a Muslim by birth and by practice, he had great appreciation, very, very great appreciation for the Goswamis, and as a result, great appreciation for Vaishnavism. There are two stories that he narrated while there. One of them was amongst his court pundits in Agra. He split his time between Agra and Delhi and went up and down in a royal, whatever it was, chariot, conveyance somehow. So in Agra, there was a debate amongst his court pundits. They may not have called them pundits, but scholarly people. Which is greater, the Ganga or the Jamuna? And they couldn't reach a conclusion. So he sent a messenger to Jiva Goswami and asked Jiva Goswami if he could come and help settle this debate. Jiva Goswami replied, "I've made a vow that I'll not leave Vrindavan for even one day. So if you can make an arrangement for me to go to Agra early in the morning and return by the evening, then I can come." So Akbar agreed. And he sent his Rolls Royce chariot to Vrindavan and took him to Akbar, came palace in Agra. And Jiva Goswami was very quick. In essence, quoting scriptures, the essence was, while the Ganges is purified by washing the lotus feet of Lord Vamana, thus entering into this universe and sanctifying the universe. On the other hand, the source of all avatars is Krishna, and Krishna would bathe regularly, not just his feet, but his whole body, would regularly bathe in the river Jamuna. So the river Jamuna is more auspicious than the Ganga. And everyone accepted. And he made it back to Vrindavan in time that he kept his vow. So the king, Akbar, wanted to offer some dakshin. And Jiva Goswami refused, and he insisted and insisted. So finally Jiva Goswami said, you can make copies of the Vedic texts that are in Benares, and I can keep them in my library. So that's what he did. He had copies brought to Jiva Goswami's library. There's many, many, many nice things about Akbar. Although he was Muslim, he had deep appreciation for Vaishnavism. So one of the things that Jiva Goswami requested of him was that Keshigat, mentioned already earlier, Keshigat is near the place where Prabhupada stayed for 6 years as a vanaprastha. The stones that make up the ghat, Keshigat, are in disrepair. Can you make some arrangement to have it properly repaired? So Akbar said, I want to come and personally examine, see what the extent is. So he came, he got in a boat, and as he was moving about in the boat, he had Krishna revealed to him the spiritual world. Meaning, he saw Keshigat as it is in the spiritual world, not the worldly Keshigat. And everything in the spiritual world, according to Brahma Samhita, is made of Chintamani gems. So he saw all of that and experienced all of that, and then the curtain closed. He's in his boat, seeing the spiritual world. And when he got back to the shore, he said, I don't have the qualification to do this service, but I can give you the financial resource to fix the broken parts of Keshigat. So he, using the royal treasury, used his royal treasury to help make repairs for Keshigat. Now, there's reality, the point I wanted to bring, there's reality that we cannot see because there's a covering. The covering is the covering of Maya, and the Maya covering comes to one who has a misconception of who they are and who is the Supreme. Where for one who receives mercy, then that covering can be removed, and at least some spurti or some momentary glimpse into spiritual reality can be experienced. It's a different reality. It's a different experience. It's a different world than the world that we're accustomed to seeing every day, just because of covered consciousness. Okay, so here's the statement that Prabhupada is making in his commentary. After the rainy season comes, there's green everywhere. And although there's green everywhere, it doesn't last too long. And similarly, everything in this material world is temporary. Severe austerities for temporary gain are simply a waste of time and energy. People are thinking by these austerities, it could be, the austerities of just working hard and being a 14 hours a day working person. That's austere, or whatever the number of hours a day some people work. So there's austerity, but austerity is for what purpose? It's for some temporary gain. And anything that's temporary, along with the happiness comes distress, because that benefit is after some time gone, and then it's distress again. It's just the nature of pursuit of material happiness. So instead, what Prabhupada is recommending in this commentary is permanent happiness and eternal life. Just taking this text about nature and the greenery that comes during the rainy season. Don't strive for temporary, strive for permanent happiness and eternal life. Human life is meant for ending all miseries and achieving the ultimate goal of life. Not something temporary and limited. life of freedom in eternity, complete knowledge, and blissful atmosphere. So Satchitananda is introducing just from this simple example of the greenery that comes at the time of rainy season. One should try to live in the unlimited clear sky, again, the imagery of nature, overflooded with rays of sun and moon. And he concludes, worthy austerities are those which give rise to a life of freedom, found within the spiritual goals of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Downpours of mercy from the Supreme and from those jivas endowed with the human spirit are essential to achieve this aim. Remember the theme. The conference is elevation of human spirit. So he's addressing the thoughtful, leading, unifying, principled personalities, how this can be fulfilled by drawing upon scenes from nature. The 5th chapter, this is it for our class just now. What happens when there isn't proper guidance? Because from some of the earlier verses, leaders need proper guidance. Supposing it's not available, then what? It's like fireflies or glowworms in the darkness. The evening in the rainy season is dark all around. There is no sight of the twinkling stars on the horizon or the pleasing moon. They're covered by clouds. The insignificant glowworms become prominent in the absence of the luminaries in the open sky. So this is going to be speaking about pseudo-religionists, the fireflies and glowworms, when it's dark at night. There's seasonal changes by the movements of time. Time moves the seasons. And then there's bigger and much larger cycles of time. The life of Brahma, the days of Brahma, and the years of Brahma, and the months of Brahma, and long periods of time. But as the yugas pass, it's like the changing of those seasons. The present age, Kali Yuga, is compared to the cloudy season. And there's many difficulties experienced during this damp and cloudy and rainy season. So similarly in Kali Yuga, there's not proper guidance to the individual or to leaders because they're unqualified brahmanas. Therefore, there's darkness, just like it in the rainy season. The light of the moon, the light of the sun, and even the light of the stars is gone. There's no sight of twinkling stars or pleasing moon. Instead, there's insignificant fireflies and glowworms. Has anyone here not seen a firefly? Have you seen a firefly? Yeah. I remember one time visiting, this anecdotal, but one time visiting in Italy. And there was a project that was purchased during Prabhupada's time. It became known as Villa Vrindavan. And Villa Vrindavan, before it was an ISKCON project, was a vineyard, like rolling hills and lots of... So they uprooted all those vineyards because it was used for making wine and made it into pasture ground. So someone was giving us a tour of the place, and there's the cows, and so at the bottom of the hill, kind of sloping down, there was a giant bull. The guy was really big, and he was making a lot of noise, and he'd like, let that guy out of that pen and he'd trample everybody. like Aristasura. It's kind of scary. And by that time, it was starting to get dark. And there were fireflies zooming all over the place. And I was amazed at the apparent amount of light given by these little, during the daytime, you don't even see them. They're just bugs flying around. But at night, it's like a light show. They don't crash. I don't know how that happened either. They must have some special radar or something. They don't crash into one another. That's the image when I think of fireflies. Self-made incarnations and pseudo-religion has become prominent in this age of quarrel. The alternative in this age of quarrel and any age is the disciplic succession, because through disciplic succession we can actually get light. And just like the light of the Bhagavata comes to us through disciplic succession. When it's properly heard and chanted, then there's light available. And then people in general, as well as leaders, can be guided properly. And that's the alternative to a misguided or not properly directed group of people that make up human society. So this cultivation of human spirit coming from disciplic succession, delivering the message of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. That's how Prabhupada ends. That's the end of the 5th verse. So that's our topic. It's 1 o'clock. I get a little excited about presenting this because I find it's just masterful. I said it several times, but how Prabhupada can take just something that's a scene of nature and create a network of understanding and wisdom for his readers or for his audience. And as we go along, the themes that Prabhupada would speak about much later and right to the very end of his mission, it's all included in this very early publication to a different audience with different language, couched in metaphor and simile and different ways, style of writing. But brilliant. So that's my appreciation. Let's see if there's some discussion. Hey, Hare Krishna. Snuck in.
Thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, it's amazing how Prabhupada has written this for that audience. I was also thinking about this. He should have been experiencing it, and thereby he was, he wrote the same so easily. So he was seeing the nature as is, with Krishna's touch in it everywhere, and he wrote it. That's it's amazing. I'm just going with your realization. I also appreciate it. I have a question. This is the first time I'm hearing Akbar. Akbar's vision of Keshi God that he received from the spiritual world. And it made me wonder what kind of qualification he had to see that.
Serving the Vaishnavas.
And serving the Vaishnavas, yes, many people serve, but they don't receive it. So it is like anything special.
Oh, it's Krishna's mercy. But he served in a consistent service in very elevated ways. He was a Vaishnava. He was an elevated Vaishnava, serving elevated Vaishnavas. He helped, and there's examples, there's dozen examples of things that he did, his service to the Vaishnavas. You want to hear some of the examples? I mean, it's your question is specifically what was his credential, because others also serve Vaishnavas. he served Vaishnavas in very elevated ways. He could have gone the other direction. Like a few generations later, it was just the opposite. Very powerful person using his power to serve the Vaishnavas. Happily. If I list some of the examples of things that he did, it's like, wow, he did that, and then he did that, and then he did that, and then he did that. It was consistent. Here's a few. Rupa Goswami, by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was able to discover the whereabouts of Govindaji. And so he placed Govindaji on a little rise of a hill and requested Akbar for the land to build a temple. So Akbar, being the king, gave legal permission for him to build the temple for Govindaji and a temple for Gopinath and a temple for Yugal Kishore. In Rajasthan, there were a number of Rajput kings. One of those Rajput kings was Raj Mohan Singh. Raj Mohan Singh was a Vaishnav, and he became the commander of Akbar's army because he's a Vaishnav. He would misuse his position. So so this Raj Mohan Singh became an initiated devotee, disciple of Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. He asked Raghunath Bhatta, I'd like to do some service for you. He said, I don't need anything, but you can build a temple for Govindaji after the land was donated. So he built the temple, and Akbar helped him with a substantial royal treasury funds for building a temple for Govindaji. When Raghunath Das Goswami was constructing Radhakund and Shamakund, he was requested to provide the first 8 steps leading into Radhakund, which he did. It keeps going on and on. He recognized the beauty of the deity Gopal, which later became Srinathji. But when he was still known as Gopal, still on top of Govardhan Hill, he provided a royal diamond to go on the chin of Gopal. And that diamond is still there in Srinathji. And on and on and on. So he gave protection and gave gifts. He was a servant of the Vaishnavas as the king, which is proper. But not many kings are proper. So he got some mercy.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. My question doesn't directly pertain to this lecture, but my question is that why does Krishna have demigods in the way that he assigns responsibilities to them to carry out his work? But if Krishna was all powerful, he wouldn't require them because it goes it kind of doesn't make sense. If he's all powerful, then why does he necessarily assign demigods?
Okay, so the why not is, since he doesn't need anybody to do anything, what does he have? He's giving them some service. and according a service according to their regard for him. So it's just like you. He didn't need you, so why do you exist? Or there's demigods. Why do demigods exist? So there's an opportunity to serve. Of course, they could say no. We can say no. But he gives us an opportunity to serve. And the demigods, because they're pious, but they're not pure devotees, so they're not in the spiritual world. They can do some service looking after the administration of the universe. And that's their happiness, is that, they're controlling. There's a material part of their happiness. And there's a uplifting spiritual part of their happiness, doing some service. You're right, he doesn't need. But the creation is there to give people an opportunity to serve. It's both a house of detention and a house of correction. The house of correction is the service. There's something behind you.
Dhanvatna Maharaj, continuing on your reply to the question which Chaitanya Prabhu asked about the Akbar, right?
Yeah.
He talked about serving the Vaishnavas. So my question is, with what mood one must serve a Vaishnava in an ideal situation?
Well, the mood is going to vary from person to person. But, the mood is these persons are representatives of Krishna. And if they can be pleased, then Krishna will be pleased. So the mood is pleasing Krishna, and the approach to pleasing Krishna is through pleasing those who are very knowledgeable in how to please Krishna. So you please them, and Krishna is pleased. That's the mood. There's varieties, but that's the principle. It's pretty easy to understand. Prabhupada makes it a real simple example. Supposing you want to meet a big man. You can't just go barge into the office and say, I want to meet Mr. Big Man. You have to have some credential. But supposing you see the big man walking his dog in a park, and you happen to cross the path and you scratch the dog under the chin and pat him on the head, and what's the name of your dog? And you make friendship with the dog. You made friendship with the big man. The purpose, that's a worldly example, perhaps taken from his morning walks in parks or something, I don't know. But it's not buttering somebody up so that you get some, good Krishna points on your report card. It's actually wanting to please those persons who are dear to Krishna, with the understanding that that's a very certain guaranteed way of pleasing Krishna. If you want to please Krishna, please those who are dear to Krishna. Because it's pleasing to Krishna. So that's the mood. But it's not, they're just kind of I'm just saying it again, but it's not just utilitarian. You get what I want. I don't really care about those persons. I really care about Krishna. You care about those persons because they're dear to Krishna. He wants the microphone again.
Continuing deeper on that topic, do we serve the non-devotees in the same mood?
Not exactly. With respect, because they're parts and parcels of Krishna, and therefore they're also dear to Krishna. But not exactly in the same way. I mean, it's a little bit like the prior question about demigods. Are you with me about the demigods? demigods. So we respect demigods, but not in the same way as we respect the pure devotees. And then aside from the demigods, there's just, insects and people and, species and so forth. So we don't neglect them, but we don't, commensurate with the intimate connection that they have with Krishna, there's special appreciation commensurate with their position. It's not exactly the same, but the principle is the same because they're part and parcel of Krishna, dear to Krishna. Anything else?
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, I've got one comment and two questions. It's amazingly impressive how in all those 12 cantos and several chapters, Srila Prabhupada picked up this particular chapter to bring such a profound message to the humanity. And all glories to the disciples of Srila Prabhupada that, they have brought this to us. It was simply amazing to see how he connected this beautiful chapter to bring peace to the human civilization. So thank you so much for sharing this with us today. The question that I have is related to, we were in the earlier part of the presentation, we looked at how the some people in China are, they worship nature. So would it be fair or would it be right to say that they actually have Brahman realization?
No. They have respect. Prabhupada writes this in Nectar Devotion. Something like this. Wherever there's a civilized society, there's some idea of worship. They may worship a hill, they may worship a bird, they may worship a feather, they may worship something, and to them it's sacred. But they're recognizing something above them, some power, maybe power invested in something, but from a powerful. And so there's, in civilized society, regardless, there's some regard. Uncivilized society, there isn't. It's like animals. But civilized society, there's some. But it doesn't mean Brahman realization.
Thank you, Maharaj. The second question that I have is, one of the slides we looked at, there should be an eagerness to receive mercy. This was just before the beginning of the 5th chapter. Yeah, thank you. So I just want to have something more from you on how that should be taken in context, because eagerness in receiving mercy could also lean towards the side of expectation from the Supreme Lord that the mercy is there, go receive it. So how to think about it in right context, Maharaj, if you can shed some light on that.
Well, the safety position to prevent, the risk that you described is humility. I'm undeserving. Rupa Goswami's Ashabandha, right in Nectar Devotion. I'm not qualified, but I'm shameless. I'm asking anyways. So the safety valve to prevent expectation is a mercenary expectation is humility. And unwavering humility will protect us from that mishap. when there's humility, then there's greater eagerness for mercy. They don't cancel each other. They amplify each other. That's on the spiritual plane. Supposing what's not on the spiritual plane, then it's, things move all over the place. There's no consistency. Or there's danger at every step, whether you go left or right or stand still. Danger. And there's protection as long as one is aligned properly. And pridelessness or humility it's a byproduct of a spiritual conception. Stay with it. That's it. You have something in the back.
I liked the way Prabhupada compared the cloud, the lightning, and the thunder to the three modes of nature.
Yeah, I like that too.
And while you started presenting, I was thinking, okay, the lightning is removing the darkness.
Yes.
And darkness is where I am, or living entities are. But interestingly, when you moved forward in the presentation, one of the slides said, Jivas are the clouds, and when properly trained, they can emit the light to disseminate the darkness which exists within the.
He was using the symbols applied differently in different cases. The metaphor was modifying to suit his purpose. And that's allowed in poetry or metaphorical language.
So I was specifically appreciating, I don't have a question, I'm just making a comment that although when jivas, they themselves are in darkness, they need light. When they are properly trained, they could disseminate
they can give light themselves.
The darkness.
Sure. That this remark has something to do with his question about the mood of service, because the mood of service is the light giving, just as Krishna gives light or Krishna gives mercy, so the devotees also give mercy. And I'm in need of mercy. I'm in need, and my nature is to serve, so let me serve those who are merciful. But the more merciful, the better. For my needy purposes. Anything else? Yes.
So, Maharaj, continuing on that same point of eagerness to receive the mercy of Supreme Lord is essential part of our well-being. I also wanted to hear a little more, Maharaj, if you so desire, that what is that mercy that we should be looking to receive? What is that mercy?
Well, again, it depends. But this access to service, because what qualification do we have to be in service to the Supreme Pure? So to have access to service to the Supreme Pure, we need mercy. And with that mercy comes all the other things. No, ignorance is dispelled, knowing who we are, the sense of satisfaction, the sense of contentment, protection. The medium is service, because the service makes the connection. When the connection is there, the darkness is dispelled. It's access to a service. And with the proper mood, which is what his question was.
So I have one for preaching application, Maharaj, that you mentioned in the beginning that bridge preaching is like reaching out to people with like and connecting with them on common grounds, and then helping them out to get to the transcendence. So, like somehow I have this in my understanding. Maybe I have experienced it also, that when the common grounds are over, at least at my level, Maharaj, that when the common grounds are over and we are.
What do you mean? When you say the common grounds are over, could you say that in some other language? Because I don't know what you mean.
Means when there is a shift happening towards the towards discussion or moving them towards transcendence.
Give me an example, because I'm still not clear what you mean.
So suppose like Srila Prabhupada here used these different metaphors and analogies, and then said that connection with the Supreme, or I mean I'm not remembering, Maharaj, if he mentioned Krishna anywhere, but connection with the Supreme. So people get alarmed when we are like starting to talk about a higher power, God. So when that shift happens, so they start becoming like alerted or disinterested or something. So at my level, like how can I
It's really easy just to say any old thing, but I'm not clear what you're asking. When you say the shift goes, I mean, what do you mean? So let's do a visual, because it's easy for me for visual.
Yeah.
I'm over here, somebody's over there, and I get on a bridge and go over to where they are and hang out where they are for a while.
Yeah.
And they start to feel comfortable because I'm hanging out with them, and then I'm accepting of them and not judging them. We're hanging out. We're building a nice relationship. Then I point to the bridge, take them by the hand, and say, "Would you like to take a step in the direction of this bridge?" Well, yeah, I trust you, and let's do a little adventure. So they go a step. So your point is, some people, when they take enough steps, they start to panic and want to run back because they don't want to go there. They don't want to go to Krishna. They want to stay in their comfort zone over there.
In the first place, they don't want to take step with me.
It happens when the relationship is right.
Yeah, I understood, Maharaj. When you gave the visual, then it was a better understanding for me as well.
And when we go across that bridge, there's a risk. Because we may become attracted to what's over there. And what's over there, meaning specifically in forgetfulness that the purpose of my going across this bridge is to help them come to Krishna. And I may start become attracted to what's over there that's without Krishna.
Yes.
You know, it's like, it's not the same, but it's like devotees going on Harinam Sankirtan. And where we would go on Harinam Sankirtan is places where materialists go. We go where people go. And they're going there not for meeting a Harinam party, they're going there for enjoyment. So, but we're going into a place where there's enjoyment for some, and we're not attracted to the enjoyment because we're attracted to the Sankirtan process. Like a nice example of that specifically is the Taste of Chicago. It's a week-long event, and people go, zillions of people go zooming into that place for their tongue. And we're on the periphery and just, having kirtan and meeting people, and so there's a risk. You reach out in any whatever the forum is, and you reach out, there's a risk, and you don't go anywhere, and there's also a risk. Choose your risk.
We can just give them some experience, and if they don't want
No,
to,
you can give them an experience, but depends on how many steps then what you want to help them take. When you develop some relationship with them, a trusting relationship, they can take more steps than just one. It takes some time to build a relationship.
it's the last question I had, Maharaj. So it was about Srila Prabhupada's mood. That he's saying that government should use taxes to build good character, and also in Bhagavad Gita he mentions that all the royal people should study Bhagavad Gita. So definitely he is having a very, very like universal approach, and since the beginning he was planning very wide and far. But at the same time, when one devotee asked him that what if Srila Prabhupada, everyone becomes Krishna conscious, and he said that won't happen. So I'm just trying to understand Srila Prabhupada's mood, that he's
Giving chance.
right.
When the light shines, some persons want to hide under a rock. When the light continues to shine. Anyways.
Opportunities there.
He just wanted people to be happy. And knowing that some people are going to say, no, that's not happiness. This is happiness. And even when pointing out, really? What about this, and this? Is that happiness? This is happiness. So, he had all faith and he had purity, and so he just distributed it. He could have stayed in Vrindavan and, perfected his life and gone back to Godhead and Haribol. But he underwent great sacrifice and great risk.
So when he said that won't happen, that means he knew that there are people who will make choices.
Yeah, people are going to say no.
Right.
Not some people, most people. Not only some people will say no, or most people will say no, some people will become aggressive and try to hurt someone that does something they don't like. It would repeat that, over and over. Prahlad Maharaj and Jesus Christ and, Lord Nityananda getting hit in the head, and, persons doing the ultimate good for others, putting it great risk. Idas Thakur, etc., etc. There's risk of life. Bhakti Siddhanta, anyway, they threatened his life. He was protected.
Thank you, sir.
I think that's it. Is that it? Srila Prabhupada ki jai.